evening, everyone. We would like to welcome everyone to the College of Humanities and Social Sciences celebration of International Women's Day. We celebrate this day annually to highlight the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women worldwide. Before we begin, I would like to start with some housekeeping rules. الترجمة الفورية ستكون متوفرة لهذه الندوة. للحصول على الترجمة الرجاء تحميل تطبيق All You Say أو استخدام الرابط الموجود على الشاشة. الرجاء إدخال رمز الفعالية وهو chss وإدخال كلمة السر 2022 واختاروا اللغة العربية. We would like this session to be interactive, so please send your questions through the Q&A box to all participants. This year's theme is Break the Bias, in which we aim to break the bias in our communities that penetrate different fields on different levels by promoting gender equality and help co-creating the narrative on gender equality in our community, along with other important actors. The College of Humanities and Social Sciences offers the only degree in Women's Studies in Qatar, and that is the MA in Women, Society and Development. And one of our research clusters at the college is dedicated to gender, knowledge, and power. This year I'm very happy to announce that I formed a research group to research women in Islam, and we started looking at women in positions of leadership and influence. Today's session was proposed actually by our research group, and we wanted to share the knowledge and raise awareness on the topic and thus we have approached the experts we have today. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Dr. Fatima Sadiqi. Dr. Fatima Sadiqi is a senior professor of linguistics and gender studies at the University of Sidi Mohamed bin Abdellah University in Fes, Morocco. She focuses on women's issues in the Middle East and North Africa and has authored multiple books and papers. In 1998, Dr. Fatima Sadiqi founded the Center for Studies and Research on Women in Morocco. Two years later, she founded the first graduate program on gender studies at the University of Fez. And in 2006, she founded the Aziz Center for Women and Development. Dr. Fatima Sadiqi will speak about women's leadership in the Middle East and North Africa. After Dr. Fatima's presentation, she will engage in a discussion with the students from the college and the research group, followed by Q&A session that will be open to the public. So please send us your questions and send it through the Q&A box to all panelists. It's a great pleasure to have you, Dr. Fatima, today and to celebrate this day with you. The floor is all yours. تفضلي.
Well, first of all, happy International Women's Day to everybody. And thank you, Dr. Amal, Dean of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at Hamad Bin Khalifa University, for inviting me to present on this day. Congratulations also on what you have just said about the creation of a unique, I would say, research group. It's a very welcome initiative. I would also like to extend my thanks to Ms. Riemann Bustami and the other staff on logistics who really helped me and who coordinated me this event. I will start this presentation, but before that, maybe I want to share my PowerPoint. I will start this presentation with a paradoxical fact. What we usually, though not unproblematically, call or refer to as the Middle East and North Africa, the MENA, is the most patriarchal region in the world. It has the lowest female life expectancy, the lowest percentage of seats held in the parliaments, the lowest reduction in fertility rate, the lowest ratio of women to men in non-agricultural wage employment, the lowest ratio of girls to boys in primary and secondary education, and the lowest GDP per capita. Even when admitting that there is a great variety in the region, every single country in the MENA has lower female employment and political leadership than the global average. Yet, and here comes the paradox, it is in this same region that women's leadership is one of the oldest recorded in human history. In the interest of time, I will focus on the Arab world. So in the light of the facts I have just given you, two questions force themselves, so to speak. Why is the Arab world such an outlier? Second, what leadership am I talking about? Concerning the first question, the main reasons for this reality, that is, why is the region such an outlier, range from unaffordable childcare, unevenness in oil wealth, the negative impact of Western imperialism on the global South that is inhibiting development and democratization, and desert geography. Other deeper reasons include a rooted patrilineal tribalism, religious authoritarianism, and gender segregation in sacred expressions of piety. As a result, women in the Arab world may have power, but not authority. With respect to the second question, that is, what leadership am I talking about? My answer is that women's leadership ranges from many areas but it has been systematically eclipsed, this leadership, or discredited, but not erased. This leadership has many faces, ranging from historical through political, religious, even military, and knowledge production. Let's look at some self-expressing facts. Excuse me. So this is just, I contextualize more or less what I said, then facts. Now I will start with pre-Islamic goddesses, queens, and army leaders. I'm taking you to the pre-Islamic period, antiquity. In this period, we have tangible proof from documents and archaeology that ancient Egyptian and Amazigh Berber women socialized freely and commanded respect as goddesses and priestesses. You have Isis, you have Tanit on my right, and Queen Zenobia, and lower, who lived in what is now Syria. She led 70,000 men into battle against the Roman Empire. And at the next to her is the North African Amazigh warrior known as Kahina, but also Dihya, who resisted Arab armies for 5 years in the 7th century. Proofs, we have that, but we also have what's called papyri. In these ancient times, what these papyri tell us is that women had equal rights under the law. I looked at inscriptions and on tombs and also marriage contracts. Many women exercised independent control over small farms, I read, or vast landholdings that spread across the provinces of the Roman Empire. Further, elite women who influenced politics throughout the ancient period appear in men's histories, in letters, in speeches. Such women are admired or vilified in men's poetry and plays. Inscriptions, especially on tombstones, and often in women's words, also offer very good insights into the lives of the less wealthy. By seeking economic advantages of female wage labor, they fought suspicion, they fought stigma, social ostracism, as well as prestige and purity through female seclusion. In the 2nd century before Christ, a private letter from Ptolemy. This letter I have researched in a book I co-edited called Women Write in Africa. In this letter, she wrote something to her brother, but the letter is not important in itself, but she urged him to return from his travels as swiftly as possible. In the letter, she describes all she has done with regard to their fields, crops, but clearly she needs him, she said, for the family business before officialdom. This is in the past. This letter is unusual, not because Ptolemy is a woman, but because the letter has survived and allows us to affirm women's literacy and active participation in literature, since man's surviving correspondence makes clear that the women they wrote to read and responded with letters of their own. The existence of literate women, moreover, reaches back to the old kingdoms and the first of the female pharaohs during ancient time. One more word about these papyri are that in the Fayoum of Egypt, for example, during the early decades of the 20th century, they surfaced as papyri. It's the first time that people started to be interested in them. Thousands of fragments were recovered and more continue to appear to the day. A consortium of Western universities bought those available and translated and separated them, matching, and are still matching pieces. Good. Khansa, pre-Islam, but also Islam. She was a poet. What's important about Al-Khansa is that she is acknowledged as a genuine source of Arab writing, of Arab codification and Arab studies. I read this in classical works that are now used, classical works in Arabic, Al-Baladuri, Al-Tabari, this is the 9th, the 10th century, Al-Asfahani, Al-Hamawi, Al-Suyuti, the Encyclopedia of Britannica, where this woman is acknowledged as one of the sources of the Arabic language of writing and also of grammar because of the quality of her style. I think she was one of the people, speaking in linguistics terms, that actually started what's called classical Arabic as a sociolinguistic term, because she wrote in a language which had grammar and a lexicon. Concept of Islam, Aisha, powerful hadith and fiqh producer. Al-Tirmidhi, one of the hadith compilers, says, ما أشكل علينا صحابة رسول الله. He's talking about the companions of the Prophet, peace be on him. قط ما أشكل علينا قط حديث قط فسألنا عائشة إلا وجدنا عندها منه علما. Whenever we, the companions of Allah's messenger, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, had some difficulty concerning hadith, we would ask Aisha, who would invariably give some explanation and solve our difficulty. After Aisha, this is, through the 12th century, Damascus and Cairene women defied prescriptions. They even preached and all, but she was this leadership. No grammar before that. Hani al-Hurini was a notorious grammarian. Al-Suyuti, who is considered in Arab, in Ulum al-Lugha, who died in 1505, who wrote Al-Muzhir, considered the fundamental encyclopedia of linguistic studies of Arabic, said in بغية النحات on page 488, قرأت على أصيلة الثقة الخيرة الفاضلة الكاتبة هاني بنت أبي الحسن الحوريني. I was taught by a trustworthy, the generous, the wise, the writer هاني بنت أبي الحسن الحوريني. Quickly, to modern times. But before that, maybe a calligrapher is a pioneer. Her name is Fadl. She pioneered, she died in 873, and she left a heritage of calligraphy. Modern political freedom fighter. This picture shows Algerian women. And as you may know, I mean, Algerian women are known for their participation in against the colonizers. And to the day, they have been recognized as such. Also, I could find some pictures about Moroccan women. You have the picture with the mountains behind this is rural areas, and urban women on the other picture. Now, this is Morocco under colonization, and these women were part of the struggle. Before and the independence of the country, we also had in the region very strong civil society, sorry about the typo, pioneers. We have collective, the one with many women, that's the first association which saw the light of the day here in Fez, where I am speaking from. It was created in 1946 by a group of elite women whose fathers, that's true, or brothers were nationalists, but they did establish an independent association which they called Akhawat al-Safa, Sisters of Purity. On my right is, of course, Huda Sha'rawi, the notorious Egyptian who also was a pioneer single-handedly most of the time of Egyptian civil society. They opened the door to many other women of the 40s and 50s in Iraq, and women also more in Egypt. You can see Nabawiya Musa and the others, and also the one underneath, that's Malik al-Fasi. All these women, they had one thing in common, as they wanted to promote the education of girls in cities and sometimes beyond the cities. The one in the lower, the two lower pictures on my left is the Tunisian Bshira Mrad, with 3 pictures of her. They actually, this whole story of education is very important in women's leadership. In the 19th century, as you know, Europeans colonized North Africa. I will say something about North Africa. Women gained, what happened is that women gained a new self-consciousness that transformed their efforts for enlightenment and empowerment from individual achievement to collective action. Education became the avenue to a new articulation of women's place in the public spheres of North African societies. Nationalism mixed with self-empowerment turned many women into members of an organized resistance to colonial power. During the later 20th century, they struggled to change the social order in accord with their own altered consciousness that demanded equity and equality. The new 21st century finds their efforts unfinished, but in progress. Confrontation with European modernity provoked elite debates about women's place in society. As men became more and more educated, they increasingly valued female education to create good wives and mothers, I must add. Although clerics denounced girls' education, this is what they had to do with. Although they denounced girl schools as un-Islamic, feminists fought back. These women, they didn't call themselves feminists, they fought back. They published in journals, they debunked women's narratives, they decried their imprisonment and highlighted scriptural support for their equality. They critiqued top-down economic modernization and societal transformation. They were not passive in nationalized religious institutions and state-led control, they feminized civil society, hence forcing ideological changes. By working with grassroots, small but independent associations, they created changes that reached the masses and made cracks in their deferential to religious authorities. They championed independent critique of traditional ideologies in the wider society. They are present in modern debates about Islam. They are aware that modernization became discredited by economic stagnation and the fanatic clerics equating modernity with a rejection of Islam and declaring the economic and military failures of the state to be punishments for aping the West. These fanatics called on men to restore order and piety, that is female seclusion. That's how it was translated in the minds of many people. They resisted intimidation, they petitioned for reform, they warned against backlash. We have two examples, one in Iran, but I'm talking about the Arab world, and one in Morocco. 1 million signatures was a success to reform the law. They are fighting against extremism. Remember the Black Decade in Algeria. Islamists in this country instilled fear by killing female teachers and raping journalists. When Moroccan feminist petitions for reform, and I was one of them, they were harassed and condemned as anti-Islamic Western stooges. Repression likewise persists in other countries. They are fighting also sexual harassment on women, and I can go and they can go on and on. Female employment rose, but there are examples are abandoned here. Let me take you again for more women. We have women in art, literature, architecture, and sciences nowadays, the younger generations. You have pictures of that. The first one on my left up, that's art. And that now Arab women writers, more and more women are coming forward. And we have now encyclopedias of Arab women writing. We have women architects. I mean, as you see, Haddad, she's now like an icon, and we have women scientists. I am taking you to the younger generation, but the price was sometimes high. Women needed to fight all sorts of violence. I chose this picture only as a symbol. It's only symbolic, but violence can have many faces. But women persisted and persisted. And violence continues and continues, but they persist. Now, because of all this, and because of what women were and women are, what we have today is strong voices, women as agents of change, tireless advocates who led to reform in their countries and advanced gender equality and women's rights. They persisted despite numerous social, cultural, and political obstacles. We have some hopes coming from the cracks there. This is a picture of a young Amazigh woman who tries to see her culture as not anti-Islam, but it's her culture. The Berbers of antiquity are no longer the Berbers of now. We don't want to see this culture, as frozen in the past. You have new hopes there, and they are changing. At least this is something I know, Moroccan society in big ways. And they want to end with a story. I was not planning to share it with you, but last week, this book, One Wish, was published in New York. And I participated in the launch by Zoom. But the book has a story. I was approached during Corona times. I remember it was in March 2020, the end of it, by a woman from the US. Her name is Mindy Yüksel. I don't know whether she has an Arab origin or not, but she told me that she saw Fatima al-Fihriya in a museum in New York, and that somebody told her that she built the oldest university in the world in Fez, Jami'a al-Qarawiyyin also, which still exists and is up and running. So she wanted me to help her with information, which I did. So I feel very much connected to this book, which looks like a book for children, but it's for everybody. She talks about this woman, Fatima al-Fihriya, and I'm going to give you her words, what the author says in this book, in the preface of this book. But she also looked for, I think she found an American Moroccan who did the drawings there. It's really a very nice book called One Wish. This is what she wrote. I call it the power of knowledge. She said Fatima al-Fihri loved to learn. She wanted to know everything, like how birds flew, why the sky was blue, and how flowers grew. But more than anything, she wanted a school for all, where anyone could study and become whatever they wanted, like teachers, scientists, and doctors. As she grew older, Fatima carried her one wish inside her through good times and bad. Fueled by her faith and her determination, she worked hard to make her one wish come true. For over 1,000 years, Fatima's one wish, her school, served students and scholars from around the globe, and it continues to do so. Jami'at al-Qarawiyyin is where Ibn Khaldun studied, where Al-Idrisi, a geographer, where Ibn Battuta and other scholars of the region came and studied. This true life portrait of an extraordinary Muslim woman, which shows the importance of never giving up on your dreams and how we all have the power to change the world for the better. Why I'm sharing this with you? It's because, I mean, maybe I don't have the depth or the style of this author, but how I saw it, well, here's an American young woman who is using a 9th century Muslim woman as an example to write and inspire other women all over the world. I thought it was, this story had a place in this presentation. And they will end with two sayings about leadership, which I think we can apply to leadership of Arab women. Says that a genuine leader is not somebody who searches, a searcher for consensus, but a molder of consensus. And I think the women I gave you, those examples, I am very selective given the time, are this. Or both Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi are people, self-made men who spoke and acted from the margins. So Gandhi said, be the change we want to see. And I end on that, and your questions are most welcome.
My name is Dana Alwan. Thank you very much, Professor Sadiqi, for your talk. I'm going to open up the floor to our students who have prepared some questions and are engaged and interested and eagerly awaiting to ask you some questions. So I'm going to leave the floor to them. Azza, would you like to start? Please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fatima, for your insightful presentation. And thank you for raising the issue of women's leadership in the MENA region. Just a quick note that in the last few days, the social media buzzed with the issue of hiring an Egyptian woman as a judge. And she was attacked by many people. They claimed that, saying, and I'm sorry for repeating their words, but they claimed that لن يفلح قوم ولوا أمرهم لامرأة. We all know that women in the MENA region face many socio-economic and political barriers. But my question is, what are the political barriers that women leaders face in the MENA region?
I think the question was about the political and socioeconomic impediments to women's leadership in the region. I believe that.
Yeah. There are many. And these, they migrate to social. When the people who write on social media are real people who live in specific societies. I think that there are many impediments and they have always existed. So I cannot say that there will be a time where impediment exists, because the bottom line of all this is based on power, and people don't give, rights easily. You have to fight for them. I think but things are changing. Like our sons are not like our fathers. This is how I see it. There is hope. There is change, because I think the people who need to change are young men, more than young women. But let me answer your question. The impediment, I think the hardest and the most difficult to talk about is rooted in fiqh, is rooted in Islamic jurisprudence, which is taken as the basis of political statehood in our region. So it's very easy to just quote out of context something like naqisatu aqlin wa din, or what you have just said, and people will immediately believe it. Why? Because since we were kids, these things we have been drinking and actually adding to our minds all our lives. It's very, very difficult even for women to get rid of that. And we should not point our finger to men only, because women also, who makes men? It's women. So women are also there. So I think of what I'm saying as hope for society. What's good is that now more and more people are aware of the fact that society as a whole cannot move an inch if women stay the way they are, if there is no change in their status quo. So women should do something, and also society should do something. And the political arena is hard for all women, not only us from the world. All women find politics as the moment women started to enter politics, that's enter the public space, that's where the alarms started to, it takes education, it takes consciousness, it takes man, it takes religious man, it takes everybody to change, and change gradually. But I don't think that what has been started will go backward, in spite of everything. I think what our ancestors started is being carried out. They may, all the women I have researched didn't enjoy a life in palaces and what have you. Women, they really suffered all their lives, and many of them didn't do it to be recognized or to be famous. They did it, and what they did stayed. And it's like a snowball. So problems, yes, they exist. They exist in the family. They exist, as I said, the most patriarchal, patrilineal, tribal societies in general are ours. regardless of class.
Thank you, Dr. Sadiqi. I believe there are a bunch more questions for you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Sadiqi, for your presentation. I just have a question about how can we talk about the notion of intersectionality of class, race, and gender when we discuss a topic like women's leadership in the MENA region? Because I think we often disregard this intersectionality when we talk about, for example, agency, women's agency and leadership in the MENA region. So how would you talk about that?
Thank you for the question. Intersectionality, and actually it was started by a feminist who died recently, and it was based on women's experiences. She was investigating health in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is a city in the US where you have Blacks, Latinos, whites, what have you, people from Asia. And it was then that she realized that a lot of people, a lot of things come together and intersect various levels to create a condition or a context. Her simple idea became a big theory, which are widespread. I think it can be used. I have not used it to the depth, but I can understand it. That is, of course, I mean, to achieve leadership, in my view, it has to be first something that a woman believes in. It should come from her. Second, it should be contextualized from her context, should be homegrown. So she needs to find the intersections from her context and her homegrown constraints to understand what pushes her forward or what blocks her. So the way I see it is that intersectionality, with all this disillusionment with globalization, should be situated in specific contexts where women are. If I am working with rural women, for example, I have to see the things that will intersect in leadership in a Moroccan rural area wouldn't be the same as things that intersect, for example, in the center of Cairo, or in Abu Dhabi, or in Doha. Why not? So it depends on the specific life experience of the woman and her context. And she has to start by operating within these and intersect with others as she goes on, because intersection itself is a big thing. I mean, things intersect at the micro, then at the macro level. I hope I have addressed this. If there are things you want me to go into, please go ahead.
No, I think this was this answered the question. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, thank you, Dr. Sadiqi, for the presentation. My question is that around the world, women leaders are usually elected through parliamentary system, where they are elected by the parties or through special allocated seats. But do you think such leadership can change or has managed to change the views of the public about the female leadership? Because if they are not coming through the public votes, and we see that around the world, whenever the polls are conducted about the female leadership, so most of the public does not show their trust on it. So what do you think, it is helpful in a way or not?
Yeah, so your question, correct me if I am wrong, is that women are elected to parliament and they get votes. And do I think that the general public looks at them as genuine leaders in politics? Is that your question or not?
Yeah, looks at them as a leader, and do they help to change public views about female leadership with their effective leadership?
Well, it depends on women first. Second, it depends on how they were elected. I will answer you from experience. The first two women who were elected without a quota, they were not nominated, they were elected. One of them was a colleague here in Fez. She was a professor of history. and the other one was from Casablanca. Now, the one from Fez, she belongs to an elite family, and her family were all politicians. People voted for her because they know her family, they know her brother, her father, and believe me, I mean, the first term, like all politicians, even males, she was trusted. She worked very hard. It cost her family, and she had to divorce and all that. But she had like the sympathy of the population. But when she wanted to extend her date, a lot of people resisted that, and they insulted her. One of the insults was that she was divorced. And she actually divorced just because she wanted to be a good politician. Anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is that, well, whether people trust, it depends. So if you are elected, yes, well, it's the first period, like everybody else, I mean, people show some trust and they want to convince themselves that they have made the right choice. But after a certain period, this trust, I don't think whether it just vanishes, but people want somebody else in general. This is my honest answer. But we have also an experience with quota. Many women are, even today, in the Moroccan parliament, elected because a quota system is mandatory. Every party should allow 10 give women on top of the list, etc., etc. Those are not trusted at all, and even by women. And they have been criticized, but it depends also on the women. The women who are energetic and who do things, they manage to a certain extent to survive. I keep discussing these things with many friends in politics, and they tell me that there is always a glass ceiling in politics. There are things they cannot go, that is further than in many issues, and they have to keep to women's issues and all that. And sometimes they are in caucuses and they create problems. This creates problems for male MPs and so on. This is, but I mean, having said that, I also want to look at the picture from another angle. At least we have women in parliament. At least we see them. So when I talk to my young students, and you know that you get younger every year, so the youngest students are different. When I compare them to the students, the youngest students seem to accept a woman in a position of power. And many young women are not at all that is reluctant to have a woman boss. They think these values run in society, that a woman who does a good job is more trustworthy. So this trust, it's politicized itself. So sometimes in business, for example, women are accepted as leaders. In the region where I am, not only in Morocco, in Tunisia, Algeria, and Egypt, they are accepted. Women are accepted as leaders. Politics is what it is. Politics, you have sometimes to lie to be a good politician, and people know that. And there is social media. And if you do one small mistake as a woman, it becomes big the following day. So there's also that. So I'm trying to be an academic here, and just to show you that your question has two answers. It's positive and negative. But what I see in it positive, and I want to underline, is at least there is progress. At least we started with 2 women. Now we have 10% of the parliament, of the members out of, we have 67 women out of 395 that I know. So it's 10% is female. In Algeria, the same thing. In Tunisia, the same thing. So this means that whatever, I mean, regardless of what they do, their visibility is in itself creating some change with the younger generation. Veiled or not veiled, religious or not religious, what have you, but the fact of seeing a woman working or visible in itself, that's leadership. So, yeah, and we should resist, I mean, the backlash that wants women to be just home only. Women deserve more than that.
Thank you, Dr. Sadiqi. I know there are more questions in the room, but we're starting to get some questions online. So I'm going to try and read both questions, and perhaps you can offer some reflections on both questions together, just in relation to time. So the first question comes from Mahau, who is a PhD student of CHSS, who says, thank you so much for this great lecture. I plan to do fieldwork in Morocco in the coming years. I'm glad to have this opportunity today. At CHSS, we have more female students than male students, and our dear colleagues offer creative and critical thinking in gender issues, which I think is a positive contribution to shape a more equal society. According to a brief conversation with a Moroccan colleague, I was told that in some, if not all, Moroccan universities, the numbers of female students are also higher than males in recent years. So my question is, how does this educational change, hopefully an advantage, interact with patriarchal perspectives and social norms in Morocco? So there are two questions on Morocco, so I thought perhaps I would just ask you both and you could offer some reflections. Yeah, please.
So the first one is the high percentage. What's the second one, please?
I will read it right now. So the second one comes to you from Hatem, who's a student in the MA program in WSD, who says, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm wondering about the importance of representing women leadership as collective rather than an individual issue. There are communist parties in Morocco where collective women, Jewish, Amazigh, etc. These collectives and communal forms of leadership, I believe, are better examples of radical social change rather than singular cases in which the collective labor often goes unnoticed. Also, should individual leadership always be celebrated? For example, can we really celebrate Dihya as a military leader, someone who has committed war? Finally, what do we make of February 20th movement and women's involvement in this movement? And how can we include queer women, anti-Mahsen politics, Sahrawi politics, leftist women when talking about leadership?
That's a big question. Yeah, that's good. Good. So I will address the first question. It's true. I mean, thank you for both questions. They are extremely important, and I'm very happy to answer them. First one, the percentage of women in Moroccan universities is higher. That's this is a survey that was back in 2006. We had 62% of Moroccan students at our universities were female. And we constitute 1/3 of the teaching staff. So women are represented there, and they used that a lot to create empower the gender program that was started in 2000. Why is that? A number of reasons. First, this is from experience, what is changing every year. Young male students prefer to go to PhD, MA, PhD. Whereas our female students, they, generally speaking, I'm not generalizing, they quit after the BA, the equivalent of the BA, and prefer to get married. Many of them. For example, I remember in the gender program, we used to lose many brilliant female students, and she would, well, I need to get married first, and I will continue, and I never see them again. Yeah. So in the gender program that we created, you may be surprised at this, we had more male students than female students at the beginning. And I think the situation is changing, but not much. It's a fact that more girls or more female students prefer to get married, and once they get married, then they start the family, and it becomes very difficult to continue. Our very first PhD thesis was written by a male student in 2008. The second one was written by a male student. It was only the third one was written by a female student. So you can see that the pattern, that's the pattern I used. Because of social pressure, family pressure, conditions. Sometimes the family is poor and there is pressure from the father, there's pressure from society, there's all this, and then the student ends up by just quitting. So that's the major reason for this. The other thing is that in the past, many the women who stayed in the university, usually they married colleagues, or students they went to school with. This is disappearing from Moroccan universities. So the university is simply a place, it's no longer a place which is designed to allow women a space to meet someone to marry. That's also an issue that women address. Maybe another reason is the possibility of a student migrating to France to continue their studies, or to Germany. These are the two countries where they go, or Spain. And usually girls or female students find it difficult to travel, and it's easier for men. Migration is becoming an issue in itself and more difficult, so more and more male students would further their studies than female. But I have been contradicted by a study which had appeared in Casablanca 3 years ago, where it is shown that the number of females migrating for knowledge is actually on the rise, which is good news. But my study, I did it on Fez. Fez is a rather conservative city compared to Casablanca and Rabat. Now, the second question is very important and deep also. Leadership, individual versus collective. I agree with you. Collective leadership, and what I mean by collective is when you have not an individual, but also then it's easier to have, because you are an association, it's easier to have the support of all human rights associations, all the other associations that care for the advancement of there is support between associations. Now, since you are asking me about Morocco, Morocco is a country where it's very easy to start an association. The association that Dr. Amal mentioned, ISIS, that I started, we actually established it overnight, 48 hours. It's easy to, but the thing is that the issue is to continue, and that's where you need to work as a collective number of people. So and then you find support. You are right. When it's a collection of like-minded people, it makes the job easier. But there is a little thing there. You have a collective work, but at the same time, within the collective work, you have women doing their own on the side. Individual role models, I also believe in that. It's very important to have individual models. The model we have this year and last year is a woman. I don't know whether you've heard of her or not. Her name is Aisha Shinna. She must be in her approaching 80 now. She started an association of abandoned children without a father. And she continued. She was actually met with a lot of resistance from every side, but she continued. And she rescued many children who now became doctors, medical doctors, became engineers, and who write about her. Her association has a French name, Solidarité Féminine, feminine solidarity. And her story is beautiful because she's a nurse. She's not highly educated, but and she speaks in Moroccan Arabic, not standard Arabic, not French. And she says that there are children on the street, especially at the end of the 1990s, and that if we don't take care of them, they will become extremists and they will kill us. People understand that. And she talks to religious people. People hear her, what she says. She is one person who you cannot imagine how many people she affected. She had a call from the king himself, the late king and the present king. She has the respect of everybody. And she deals with the most taboo of all taboos. That is, children with mothers who come forward as prostitutes sometimes, as women who were raped by their family, as things that we don't talk about. And she managed to have people talk about these issues, face our difficulties and our problems. So to answer you, I believe in both. I think collective leadership, yes, is more likely to be supported, but exceptional individuals need also to have a place. This is what I think, and from what I have seen. And you have the same thing in Algeria. I mean, Jamila is now celebrated in cinema as she was a freedom fighter. She's known all over the world, like the Che Guevara of the female Che Guevara. Bshira Belmrad in Tunisia, Huda Sha'rawi. These women also, I mean, they inspired me, if you ask me. These women still inspire. But I have to answer also, you as a young PhD student, yeah, it's good to have a collective and individual. One word about Dihya. Yeah, we cannot celebrate war. I agree with you. But it's, if you compare, she's called Dihya because she's a woman. When a woman is a military leader, she's not a woman. She is Dahiya, or she is Kahina, or she is. I just want some equality there. If we don't celebrate war, we shouldn't celebrate it with men either. So it's just, it's good that you picked up that. Yeah. I am not for war, but it's good to also mention all women who could achieve some kind of notoriety and attract the attention of historians. Controversially, yes, but at least they are there. Not a good example, but anyway. There's also Tin Hinan, a Tuareg woman. She was a queen. Yeah. But Dihya was a warrior. Yeah, she was a queen warrior. Thank you for these questions.
Thank you, Dr. Sadiqi, for your generous and detailed answers. All right. Dr. Sadiqi, would you like to talk a little bit about the importance of talking about leadership on International Women's Day, just to kind of give us your final thoughts about that, the importance and significance of International Women's Day?
Yeah, the International Women's Day, I see it as a symbol. Yeah, it's just symbolic. I mean, it's one day out of 365 days, but it's symbolic. It gives you the opportunity to remember our ancestors, our women who actually inspired us, inspired men and women, and to celebrate that. And it's also good to be women being nice to women and men being nice to yeah, because I don't think, sorry, in all cultures, women who become in their lifetime, they are not usually admired in their lifetime, but whatever they leave behind when they pass is remembered. So on this day, I hope that we celebrate these icons, what women have done, what women in rural areas who are toiling in the cold and to keep their families together. It's all women, all experiences of women are important. And I thank you very much for inviting me to share my thoughts on these topics that are very close to my heart.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fatima Sadiqi, for joining us today. It was a pleasure to hear you and to learn from your work and your experiences. Thank you, everybody online and also in this classroom for joining us. We appreciate your valuable insights. We wish everyone a great day and yeah, have a good night, everybody. Thank you.